All it took was one carefully choreographed moment at Windsor to change the temperature around the monarchy. A door opened, cameras clicked, and the Prince of Wales stepped forward with that measured, unmistakably regal poise, offering a firm handshake and level gaze to Kuwait's crown prince, Sheikh Sabah Al Sabah. No speeches, no flourish, just a confident, statesmanlike welcome that said more in 10 seconds than a dozen press releases. King Behaviour, wrote one viewer. Another, the future of the monarchy. The clip rocketed across feeds, but the subtext was louder than the applause. William is back in the nerve center of royal duty, and the timing could not have been more deliberate. Because this was not an isolated photo call. It came days after William slipped into Aberdeen and drove into the stillness of Balmoral for private time with his father. For months the commentariat had dined out on whispers of tension. Was the heir discontented? Had the king's solo tea with Harry reopened unhealed wounds? Was there competitive frost between sovereign and successor? Then Balmoral happened, quiet, unpublicized, unmistakable, and the message from senior voices was unequivocal: Charles and William are in absolute lockstep. That phrase matters. It is the palace equivalent of underlining a sentence twice. So when Windsor flickered onto screens a few days later, the choreography clicked into place. William didn't just host a foreign dignitary, he performed a foundational task of kingship, projecting stability, respect, and intent on behalf of the United Kingdom. Watch closely and you see the training, the pace of the approach, the body angle opening the conversation, the fractionally longer handshake that signals warmth without overfamiliarity. Soft power is built in these microbeats. And Windsor is where the heir practices at full scale. Public reaction told its own story. The comments weren't merely compliments, they were a referendum on confidence. Long live the Prince of Wales, one post read, half cheer, half sigh of relief. That relief is significant. The country has had a year of unsteady weather, health scares, high-stakes diplomacy, and a constant undertow of speculation. When William appears at the center of the machine doing the work, welcoming allies, stewarding relationships, people feel the difference. Continuity doesn't announce itself. It shows up on time, shakes hands, and gets on with it. Make no mistake, Windsor was chosen. The castle is monarchy as architecture, ancient stone, modern purpose. Hosting the Kuwaiti heir there placed the encounter in a frame the world recognizes. This is how Britain does statecraft. And it cast William in the role he now occupies with increasing frequency, the connective tissue between the sovereign's long view and the day-to-day cadence of ceremonial diplomacy. It's where you learn tempo, how long the corridor walk should be, when to pivot from pleasantries to substance, when to close the meeting with a phrase that lands in headlines without sounding like a headline. Thread this back to Balmoral and you see the larger map. The Highlands tradition isn't only for stalking and family photographs, it's where plans are stress-tested away from London's echo. The king has settled there through late September, balancing rest, paperwork, and the kind of unhurried conversations that don't fit between red boxes. Inviting William into that quiet signals more than paternal affection. It's the sovereign and the heir comparing notes, pressure testing the next quarter, the state opening choreography, Commonwealth messaging, early childhood platforms, environment convenings, and which overseas invitations serve the national interest versus those that merely generate noise. Lockstep doesn't happen by accident, it is built in rooms without cameras. Of course, the noise has been loud this season. A one-to-one tea in London. Rumours about schedules. Recycled chatter about brothers on different continents. Into that chorus, Windsor's images dropped like a metronome, steady, precise, unflustered. That is how you recalibrate the narrative without saying a word. In a constitutional monarchy, perception is oxygen. You don't argue with gossip, you outpace it. There was also a quiet layer of symbolism in the choice of guest. The relationship with Kuwait is long-standing, strategically useful, and, crucially, non-controversial. It allowed the focus to rest on William's conduct rather than the partner's politics. The handshake was the headline, the subheadline was the setting, the article was the atmosphere, calm authority, institutional memory, and the sense that the baton is already being carried at speed, even as the baton holder remains firmly in the race. Watch the body language again, and you'll see how much of William's craft is now instinct. Shoulders relaxed but set. The micropause before the first question, inviting the guest to enter the space rather than filling it. The half-turn that includes aids without ceding control. This is the vocabulary of someone who has logged thousands of hours in rooms where an eyebrow can be policy, and an aside can be a headline. You do not acquire that agility overnight, you earn it, quietly, relentlessly, until the camera simply finds what is already there. The online reaction matters, because it reflects something beyond fandom, it reflects appetite. The public wants continuity without stagnation, tradition without fussiness, and humanity without melodrama. William, when operating at Windsor speed, hits those hopes. He is not a speechmaker by temperament, he is a practice convener, a connector. That matters in a decade defined less by grand bargains than by steady networks, defense ties, climate coalitions, early years alliances, mental health frameworks. The monarchy's soft power lives in those seams, and the heir's job is to stitch them. Balmoral's role in this story is equally instructive. The place's memory, the late Queen's laughter on the lawn, the battered Land Rover, the rituals of simple dinners after long walks. But it is also strategy, the calendar built with a pencil, the what ifs, mapped on a legal pad, the calls placed not for spectacle, but for leverage. When the king and the prince sat together there, out of range, out of rhythm with Westminster, they were doing what the Windsor machine does at its best, quietly aligning intent. That is the difference between coexistence and partnership. Lockstep is not just agreement, it is cadence. Consider the alternative future the rumour mill tried to sell: a peevish heir, a wary father, a court split into rival camps, a public slowly losing patience. In that timeline, Windsor becomes theatre that no longer convinces. But in this timeline, the one set by Balmoral's quiet and Windsor's precision, the choreography still compels. The sovereign sets direction, the heir operationalizes it. The institution breathes in unison. You can feel it in the pictures. There was, too, a subtle rebuke to the idea that royal relevance lives only in high drama. The last few years have been crowded with crises and confessionals, the oxygen has been thin. But the Windsor clip reminded everyone that longevity is built in the ordinary excellence of showing up well, the crisp protocol, the kind, efficient hosting, the signal sent to allies that Britain is serious and predictable. Those things don't trend for long, but they are what endure. It is also worth noting how the presentation was handled. The video landed on the Wales's official channel, brisk, elegant, unadorned. No over-edited montage, no swelling score to sell what the lens had already captured. That editorial restraint is a house style now. Let the moment stand, trust the viewer. And viewers responded in kind, filling the silence with their own captions, King Behaviour. The future looks safe. Long live the Prince of Wales. When the audience writes your headline for you, the communications plan is working. What comes next is the real test. The autumn slate is crowded: remembrance commitments, diplomatic receptions, early years milestones, environmental convenings that demand convening power more than celebrity wattage. Expect more Windsor-style images, deliberate, unfussy, strategically placed to confirm alignment between monarch and heir. Expect Balmoral's lockstep to appear again in practice, not just as a quote. Expect fewer words, more scenes like this one, a handshake, a corridor, a conversation that conveys steadiness. If you are looking for a lesson from this week, it's this: in a constitutional monarchy, unity is not declared, it is demonstrated. Windsor did not erase gossip, it made gossip irrelevant. Balmoral did not perform reconciliation, it built a work plan. Between them sits the task of modern kingship: to be utterly reliable without becoming dull, to be recognizably traditional without feeling remote, to be visible enough to reassure and discreet enough to persuade. William's return to the center of operations, the crown-adjacent space where deals are smoothed and relationships tended, showed all three. So yes, call it king behavior if you like. The phrase resonates because it captures what people want to see and what the institution needs to project: calm gravity, learned grace, and a sense that the next chapter is not a cliff edge, but a well-paved road. The Prince of Wales walked that road at Windsor with purpose. Balmoral ensured he and the king agree on the destination. And for a public that has endured a long season of noise, that combination, precision and partnership, may be the most reassuring headline of all.